Hello, beautiful. And what I really want to know is what is good in your life today? I'm Kia, and this is another episode of the Female Veterans Podcast. Today, I have Jessica with me. She is a Marine. She's also a reservist, and she is really, really good at shooting. We're going to talk about that. I can't wait to ask questions about what it's like to be on the Marine shooting team. So, we're going to get into that in a bit too. But she is also a therapist and a reservist. So she's also in a unique position of being still active, but also a veteran. So I'm really excited to have her on the show today. So welcome, Jessica.
Hi, how's it going?
It's a great day and an especially wonderful moment to spend time with a veteran sister. So I'm excited.
Oh, hi. Thank you for inviting me to the podcast. I have to admit, this is my first time. Sorry, that's my dog in the background. This is my first time hearing your podcast, and I love your opening so much. I'm like, tell me more.
Oh, thank you. Well, honey, you've got a lot of episodes to catch up on. There's so many there for you. So, welcome to the Female Veterans Podcast family. This is going to be my 7th season, and I've had a lot of amazing guests with stories, all kinds of stories, and amazing veteran sisters from every single branch is represented. And we're going to continue to do that. And I go back in time too. I have my veteran sisters as far back as the 70s, and I'm always looking to go back further for any females who are willing to share their story. So tell your moms, your grandmoms, your aunties to connect with me if they have served, because I want to hear their story too.
That's
But
amazing. Congratulations.
yes, thank you.
Love this concept.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. So let's jump right into it. I want to know what made you join the Marines?
Oh, dear. So I'm by nature very stubborn, and tenacious, and driven. I grew up in a rather poor community. My father was a Marine before I was born. He did like 4 years, became a sergeant, and I needed structure in my life, and I needed discipline because I was just like, I wasn't a wild child, but I had all this energy that I needed to harness, and I had all these dreams and passions and goals, but no real direction. And I did ROTC in high school, and there was a moment I always talk about. This really did happen. They had an intro course to ROTC, and they said anyone in middle school that wants to go to high school ROTC, come into the backyard of the school. And they literally landed like a Huey in the backyard of this middle school. And Marines came out, and I was like, I want to be that.
Just imagine what a show.
I couldn't imagine them doing that today, but I was like, I want to be that superhero. Like, I just looked upon these like individuals as superheroes in a sense of it was this challenge was there, and I just wanted to know more. And so ROTC was a place I found myself that I excelled. I could do hard, I could do tough, and I could process information very quickly under stress conditions. I was like, oh, this is perfect. I love this. 9/11 hit when I was a junior in high school, and a small town, the recruiters filled up too quickly. I couldn't go enlisted. Multiple barriers were occurring. Looking back at it, it just wasn't God's plan for my life. And I started to attend college, and I saw something shiny one day, and I was like, what is that Marine with this shiny on them? And I went and spoke to this recruiter, officer recruiter, and he basically said, I'm not chasing you. If you want it, you're going to come to me. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, you're not a normal recruiter. Deal. It took me 2 years of letter writing and trying to apply for this program. I got injured and wasn't able to complete the process. Completed college, got a couple years of recovery from that injury, and then was like, I still want it. 2 more years of letter writing, waivers, and everything else. I was selected 1 out of 4 female in the state of Maryland that year to go to OCS. And I was only 1 of 2 of those 4 to actually graduate because the attrition rate's around 60% at the time. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was, I didn't really recognize it back then. I wasn't going to quit. And so I had the privilege of going through one of the hardest trainings to get to where I was today. And yeah, that's my people. I love the whole culture. I drank Kool-Aid. I'm too motarded. I get it. So yeah, I did 4 years. Loved it. There was a drawdown. A lot of us had to leave because they were cutting the size of the forces down, and went to the reserves. Did a couple years of 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year kind of thing, and then I stumbled across the Marine Corps Reserve shooting team, and I'm a prospect for them. So I get to travel the country and shoot high power rifle. You can't make this stuff up.
You really can't.
So
Okay, so I want to talk more about the shooting team, but I'm going to back it up a bit because I want to get more into your actual active duty experience. And so I know you went to OCS. What was that like for you?
so anyone that knows the Marine Corps culture, they know that boot camp, Paris Island, San Diego, there's 3 phases. They break you down. They have this like transitional phase where they give you enough leash to choke yourself, and then they build you up. And then you become a Marine. There's a ceremonial process. For me, the officer side of the house was very different, and I wasn't quite expecting it. It may have changed since I've been in, because I went in 2011, but it was very much an individual process. It was a breakdown process. The physical requirements were you had to be at the peak of performance for your PFT, just to get accepted to go. Again, it took me 2 years of just applying to get in there. Physically, they couldn't hurt us. Mentally is where they really broke us down. So for us back then, it was sleep deprivation. They would do 3.5, 4 hours of sleep a night because you would have so many requirements placed upon you just to meet the next day, and then go through that full day and that OCS, and then have more requirements the next day. So if you didn't complete it the night before, you're going to be loaded down the following night. So again, shower was after lights out, cleaning your gear, marking your gear, doing studying because you had academics to do. Everything was done, and all of this was drop on request, or they could kick you out for leadership failure, academic failure, etc. So you were competing for that entire 10 weeks to stay there. So it was very grueling, mentally, emotionally. It was just a lot of games about, you're not going to be good enough. We're going to kick you out, blah, blah, blah. We started with 67 females and we graduated 27. The class before us graduated 14. So
Wow.
it was interesting. But then in the Marine Corps world, you go on to 6 more months of training before you even get to your MOS school. So you then go to the basic school on the same base, and that's infantry type training where you're in the field a week, you're out of the field a week, and you do 2.5 years of academics in 6 months. Of just grueling, like 9 hours of PowerPoint for that week, and then you're tested on those academics in the field, and then you come back and take an academic test starting that Monday again for 6 months. So
Girl, I definitely understand where you're coming from. I had the privilege of because I'm a hospital corpsman, so we take care of our Marines, right? So I had the privilege of getting to connect with many Marines and understanding a little bit of how difficult it is to be a Marine. Like it's tough, but you do it or you don't. Like
yes.
you either break or you're going to go through it. And so I have to give you a lot of credit for that because I understand that it's so grueling. It's mentally tough to just keep going and keep performing. And I definitely understand that whole the academics and learning so much material. I think we all get that. Having to consume and completely comprehend so much material, like years worth of knowledge in such a short frame of time. And I will tell you, when I got out of the military, I kept struggling in college. And I did my college after. So I kept struggling and I kept thinking, why am I having, like, I'm an intelligent girl. When I was young, they used to say I was quote unquote gifted. So why am I having all of this trouble in college? And then I realized it was because I was trained to learn so quick that they were going too slow. So until they started to embrace the accelerated programs in universities, I was struggling. When that happened, everything shifted. And I have that to thank to my military experience,
Yes.
but it's actually a gift. It's a gift that keeps on giving in my life even to this day. What do you think about that?
I think that when I transitioned out of active and I went to the civilian sector, I went to get my master's in marriage and family therapy. And if it wasn't for the veterans within that program at Texas A&M, my gosh, my first day of school was everyone was in pajamas and the teachers, everything was just so slow paced. What you talk about, like
Mhm.
I'm used to going 100 miles an hour military time, not
Mhm.
like civilian 10%. Everything was very difficult. And they looked at you like, why are you? I don't want to use a cliche hard charger. Why are you so driven? Why don't you slow down? And why did you finish your paper in time? Like, they try to get you to mold back
Mhm.
to what they knew. So that I can understand for veterans, especially in that transitional period, that was probably one of the hardest times of my life. If it wasn't for building the tribe around me and having my spouse who's active duty currently, the things I went through, I can imagine if I had no support, how difficult that transition would be. But yeah, no, I love the medical side of the house, the docs. They were
Yeah.
the new ones. You could always tell who the new docs were because they would come in and they would hear these Marines talk about these massive blisters on their feet that was the size of a baseball and be like, just patch it up. I'm good. I got to go back to the field. The ones that were seasoned would be like, yeah, they're good. Just patch it up. The ones that were new would be like, oh my God, are you sure? So shock factor wore off on our Navy counterparts. The more they were around Marines and the
Mhm.
stupidity. I love it.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's definitely a good time. So let's talk about once you got through all of your training and you actually got to your MOS. What was your active duty experience like?
So for me, it took me a year and a half to get through. It takes about a year and a half to get through the start of your training to the point where you go to MOS school and get out and get to the fleet for officers. So I was an air defense control officer. I controlled the concept of it is that you control aircraft in combat zones. I came in, like I said, in 2011. I got to the fleet January 2013. All the deployments are gone. So unfortunately for me, I never got a chance to deploy. My husband deployed twice. It was interesting. My MOS was very academic heavy based. We had a lot of officers, and at some points, you had more officers than you had Marines to give them. So many of us were office jobs, just trying to fill a role, waiting for the opportunity to actually lead Marines and doing our job. So a lot of exercises, a lot of traveling around the U.S. to with this large radar, trying to control aircraft at different simulated exercises with different branches of service or with among ourselves. It was good for me. It was tough in the sense that I was injured from OCS. I had a undiagnosed shoulder injury. It took them about 3 years to diagnose me, but until then, I wanted to maintain the standard. So it was a lot of physical pain I was in on a daily basis with I had a torn bicep, a torn labrum, a dislocated shoulder blade, and my spine was pulling out of alignment.
Whoa.
I'm not going to say the Navy didn't diagnose me for 3 years, but
We can I mean, no shade, but I had a misdiagnosis in the military too.
yes, yeah.
So,
I mean, again, all the schooling I was going through, all the exercises I was on, they didn't have time to really have me for any length of time before I was gone again. So I had massive shoulder surgery 3 years into my career. So I was in a lot of pain, but I was also active and trying to, like I said, we didn't have a lot of Marines, we had a lot of officers. So I became a martial arts instructor.
hmm,
I taught the martial arts for my unit. I got involved with any activity, anything I could do, because again, I loved being at that high pace, like high demand positions. So put me in any place that they could fit me. And then there was a point where there was a drawdown and I wasn't selected to stay in, unfortunately. Again, quotas, meeting timelines. A lot of us were at the same level. None of us could really shine above the other because there's no deployments or any billets that could really like make us stand out. So I got out of off of active, and that really broke my heart. It wasn't a great transition. I didn't have the XO that I had at the time was not the kindest individual towards females.
Oh no.
I don't want to make assumptions, but statistically, every female in our shop, in our unit, was in a secretarial billet. Every single.
Oh no. You're
Um,
kidding.
Not to make assumptions, that was just statistically. Maybe we were given the opportunities to have billets. Maybe it was meant to be in a positive thing, but it took us off the gear, so we weren't able to train.
But what about the guys though? Were there guys in the secretarial positions?
Not towards the end. The all the male Marines had Marines where they were off doing exercises, doing our job, training. So we were not allowed to do it in that climate culture. And just this particular person created this culture, not the whole Marine Corps,
Right,
not
right.
the whole unit, but in that particular culture, it appeared at the time that all the males were able to go off and do their training. And the rest of us that were stuck in these secretarial billets were not allowed to for at least a year. Under that, we stayed in this billet for a year.
That's
Right.
hard. Like for me, like it's hard to as a girl, right, who loves doing stuff. And if I wanted to lead, that would feel really oppressive to me. This is my opinion. It would feel really oppressive to me to feel like my talent was being wasted or I wasn't being able to perform up to my maximum capability because I was not giving the same opportunities as other people. I would have felt really frustrated with that. Did you feel like a lot of the females felt frustration?
I think it was widely known that we all could look around and say, okay, the adjutant position, the legal officer, the S2, the S3, the safety position were all filled by females. And that was how many females we had in the unit. It was always one of those gray areas where you wanted to question it, but you don't want to appear as it was a very fine line in the Marine Corps
Mhm.
and about what type of female you want to come across. You kind of want to be a team player and be one of the guys and not really assume that things were being based off of any other reason besides mission capability. So it was a gray area for sure. There was probably opportunities for me to make an EO complaint. However, again, gray area wanted to be that good Marine and just keep pushing through. So you just found ways to always continue the mission. And so for me, I did academics on the side. I tried to train on the side. I did the martial arts stuff on the side. I made myself relevant. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I look back at those 4 years and I loved my Marines and I gave everything to those Marines. And those Marines became better Marines because of the time, energy, and effort and the opportunities I afforded to them in ways that I could. So helping them advance in rank via the martial arts program. We also, my now husband and I started dating back then, and we went to a leadership camp in Baltimore. Very blessed opportunity. Basically, we were drill instructors for 150 some high school kids in the ROTC program for 6 days. This was one of those opportunities I had when I was in ROTC back in the
Mhm.
day.
Talk
It,
about coming full circle.
my God, like changed my world. Back in the day, like that was the hardest experience of my life as a ninth grader, getting yelled at by real Marines in this bubble, in a boot camp type environment. But I made it and I thrived. And I was like, man, I'm born for this. So coming full circle, me and my husband went there for 6 years, becoming these drill instructors and taking our junior Marines with us up to 24 at a time and watching them flourish as leaders and be able to train, mentor, and love these young kids through a boot camp construct. It was amazing. So I know that we definitely made our impact in the ways that we could, even though the Marine Corps finished for me in a way that, I would have loved to have been a career Marine, but God had other plans. And I accept that now. At the time, it was a little heartbreaking. So
Yeah,
it was
I
a
can
little heartbreaking,
imagine.
let's be real.
Yeah, I was gonna say, honey, I feel like you were sort of cut from the marine fabric. And I could see lifelong marine in you. Like I would not have been a lifelong sailor. That was just not who I was going to be. Right. It was a means for me to get my college education. Everybody knows that listens to this show. But I love the experience of it though. At the time I struggled, but looking back, it's one of my proudest moments. Now you seem like someone who would have been a really committed and dedicated Marine and made a long career out of it. So I definitely, and some of the things that you said too is it's leadership. And I think that's something that's a recurring theme on these episodes is depending on what base you are on and depending what the leadership style is there, it depends on your experience and how you advance and if you deploy and where you know what I mean? Like it depends, your whole career really depends on the leadership because of what they are going to decide for you. And
Mhm.
so in your situation, we're going to say that perhaps there was something going on there with the females, which would, I don't think, it's that big of a stretch, for anyone that listens to the show regularly. Right.
Yeah.
So I would definitely feel like potentially that cut your career short. And it had you had different leadership, maybe your career would have been long. But obviously, everything happens the way it's supposed to happen, and you're doing what you're meant to be doing now. But just if we were to sort of play devil's advocate, I think perhaps a different leadership might have meant a different turnout for your career. Would you say the same?
Well, so I did. I had a different leadership when I first got to the unit, and I was a water walker, golden child, given all the opportunities because I worked for them and I worked hard for those opportunities. And I was progressing to be the first weapons director on the East Coast because I just had been given a great mentorships and opportunities. The command changed as they all do, and the war started to draw down, etc. Different command climate. So I don't want to judge those that were in charge. I don't know their personal reasonings behind things, but
Mhm.
definitely, like everything else, ebbs and flows. You saw a shift. And honestly, I think John Boyd wrote a book that is said it best that during wartime, the warriors come out, and that's when they thrive and they flourish. But during peacetime, the bureaucrats come out, and the warriors get pushed to the side. So I
Mhm.
think I was ready to like, I'm going to Afghanistan, guys. I was ready. I wanted to do vet teams. I was just all drinking the Kool Aid. But like I said, I think God had a very different plan for my life. I work now, and I know we'll probably get to it later, but as a therapist, I just work with veterans and I work with them with combat experiences and military sexual assaults. And I'm making more of a difference on this side of the house than I was. But God used those experiences, those trials and those heartaches and those moments where I felt like I was getting smited or put into a secretarial billet. Well, those billets has translated to jobs that were offered to me on the civilian side and in the reserves, and it made my resume well rounded. Like, I could be safety. Look at me, cool. It really did have a ripple effect in my life, and it was a positive thing, even the bad stuff. So, yeah,
Isn't
it,
that the way it is though? Even we think it's bad, but somehow or another something comes from it that's actually a gift. So, I think it's also interesting what you were saying about you didn't want it's a gray area and you didn't want to be, a quote unquote bad Marine. So you could have made a complaint, but you didn't. I think probably like 99% of the women who listen to this completely understand what you're saying because we call it that girl, right? We don't want to
yeah.
be that girl, right? So I mean, it's just interesting because it's a repeated theme on multiple episodes of the Female Veterans Podcast of you don't want to be that girl, and also the girls who became that girl and what their experiences was reinforces the fact that you don't want to become that girl. So I can definitely understand. I don't know how it would be for the Marines, but for every other branch that I've heard from a girl that experienced being that girl, the treatment was absolutely deplorable and from male and female. So I can definitely understand why you wouldn't have wanted to make any waves whatsoever. Just saying.
I mean, but you saw it too. Like you saw it was 50%, right? Like my theory is, and when I talk to young female Marines, I'm like, be part of the team. Don't be one of the guys. You're not one of the dudes. Don't be one of the guys. we can joke similarly and we can say similar things, but there's a point where we make them uncomfortable and they're the majority, right? But if you're a good teammate, if you're carrying your own weight, if you're doing your thing and being a badass in your sphere of influence, and that means going above and beyond. Like the things that we have to do to make ourselves equal sometimes is above our male counterparts because they set the bar average, right? And the average,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just human nature. If it was a female organization and males came in, they would have to exceed the average female in order to stand out positively. And if they went against the wave or went against the culture, they would be seen negative or positive within it. So I think, especially being such a small organization, the Marine Corps, there's one female Marine for every 100 males. For officers, there's like one in 1,000. You have one bad apple who had some mommy daddy issues or some severe trauma coming into the Marine Corps, and now they're reacting to that trauma under this new stimulus. Like, yeah, they're going to stand out in a negative way. And the Marine Corps doesn't know how to handle it because they're not a mental health organization. They're a warfighting organization. I
Yeah.
can see both sides of the argument. I think there's always room and opportunities. I think the women that made the best impact in my life were the ones that rode the fine line between going against the grain, but did it really well, classy, professional, and was like amazing leaders. And you're like, I want to be like that. Versus
Mm-hmm.
the ones that just almost, I don't want to say victimize themselves because there's real causes for what they're talking about, but the ones that made themselves so ostracized that, you couldn't even relate to what they were doing.
I could see how people would feel like that. Also, it does become a fine line, I think, between trying to advocate for yourself and not appearing like a victim,
Yes.
especially within the military, because of just the mentality. It's not a strong mental health organization in any branch, okay? Even and definitely even in the Navy. I can remember one episode with my friend Kim, and she is the creator of Invisible Combat. And she was talking about her MST on the show, and she had already gone through that whole process, but had had a baby and had postpartum, and she was like sort of reliving the trauma, and also has a traumatic brain injury that was undiagnosed, by the way. So all this was happening within her, and she attempted suicide. And I just never forget this story because then they sent her to psych, right? And her in psych, she was told, we don't want any weak dogs in the army. So you try it again, you're out. Now, I imagine the therapist, the military therapist who told her that was probably trying to tough love her
Yes.
into, you know,
We hope.
we are going to hope, we hope. But every time, but the impact that it had on her, and if you hear her telling the story, and actually if you listen to that episode, it's a 2-part episode, it's huge. She breaks down a lot in the episode because it was the first time she was telling it. Like now she's like, if you hear her tell the story, it's like really polished, but back then it was the first time she was ever telling it publicly, and it was really emotional. So when you hear her talk about that, you can hear how it impacted her. So while we're sort of a war machine and we're sort of in the business of defense and missions and doing the government's bidding, we should also, I feel, it's my opinion, be more concerned and more open to mental health and the way that it's handled, because it's just necessary, even for men and women, I think. And also, facing issues. So I have a panel coming up with a couple of female veterans. We're going to be talking about drug use in the military and, rehab and how that's addressed and all of that. And I think that's really important because it's sort of stigmatized mental health and all of that. So I just think it's amazing, actually, how you got into that field after your military service. And I really want to talk about that too. So it's because I just think it's such an important part. And I think if the mental health was better while we are serving and it wasn't so stigmatized, if we were having an issue or if a trauma came up that we had prior to serving and now we're in that environment, if we didn't feel like it was such a negative thing to go seek that mental health while serving. I think a lot of people would stay in, a lot of people would be definitely much more healthy, and it would be just better for everybody. But that's just my opinion.
So I did some right before because I got bored. We moved out of my state of residency, Texas, where I'm licensed out of,
Mhm.
and my husband, like I said, is active duty. So now we're in California. So I took a job here because, again, bored. We were talking about like having to keep a high up tempo. Why I'm doing therapy, I was doing another job, and I was doing resource management, and I realized from a civilian sector, giving these Marines on this base all these resources about mental health and education and VA benefits and reserves. And yet you're correct. If I had the magic wand to change the world, I would absolutely say that there should be a good like 2 week ish seminar where you send transitioning service members to like some mental health stuff and make sure that they have all their psychology and the clarity that they need. What I'm meaning is that a lot of veterans I see have been diagnosed in the military, and the military has to diagnose you with something in order to charge TRICARE to treat them, right? So they diagnose them with borderline personality disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar, adjustment disorder, these things that are non curable. And then they say, thank you for serving, have a great life. And they don't have those real issues. There's no way that they got into the military with schizophrenia. It's
I
just
mean,
not,
really.
they didn't.
Or
Um,
borderline personality disorder. That's a big one I see all the time.
and they didn't. They don't have the multiple relationships that are failed and black and white thinking. Most likely, they have complex PTSD, is what I'm finding, and because they're able to, they don't meet the full criteria for the diagnoses. But if you look at the statistics, 1 in 3 females civilians are sexually assaulted, molested, or raped before the age of 18. 8 out of 10 females in the Marine Corps reported that they had some kind of assault before joining the Marine Corps. 8 out of 10.
Wow.
So you're talking about a majority of the female population having some type of trauma, either within the Marine Corps or before the Marine Corps. Just on the spectrum, I study Marine stuff, so I can't speak on the other branches, but and then they come in and they're already vulnerable to being triggered or traumatized again. And then
Mhm.
whatever happens in this very, testosterone culture filled with alcohol, because women are just as, let me preface it. I know for myself, and I know for the female Marines I had, we're just as much like dudes as dudes are. We want to
Yep.
or several. Um, we want to be intimate with our partners. And it's like a driven culture of testosterone and alcohol and stuff like that. So I think we don't do a good enough job with this petri dish that we are given as a government agency to be like, we can treat mental health. Can we send them someplace? Can we get better clinicians? Can we do better research to figure out how we can provide mental health within the service and transitioning, more importantly, out of the service? It took my friend 7 years to get diagnosed with PTSD, and he had severe, severe PTSD, suicidal ideation, severe alcoholism. But the VA dragged their feet for 7 years. He was a combat vet 3 times, two to Afghanistan, one Iraq, infantry in '03, '04, and '05. So obviously, just by that nature of the story, you would assume he had PTSD and now we should treat him.
Yeah.
It took him 7 years. Well, how many people took their lives within that 7 year period that couldn't wait it out?
I mean, really. I mean, that's a huge another story. And I've had several guests on here that have shared, their post military experiences with the VA that have been shocking. Actually, I have an episode coming up. Actually, no, that was Mindy's episode. That was in season 6 that she had. You can't even believe what happened with her in the VA. Like, I can't even believe it's almost unbelievable, but you're actually exactly right. How many people we were just talking about before we started about the suicide rates. How many people have taken their lives without having the proper diagnosis, the proper help that's that they need.
And just with normalizing it, because again, the VA, how to become a licensed VA counselor. So I'm working through my associate license, which means that you have to take 2 years of practicing under a supervisor before you're fully licensed. So I can't apply to be a VA therapist because I don't meet the criteria. But I know therapists that have applied and they want to because the VA pays well. They have no background in veterans, they have no background in trauma or PTSD, but they like the pay. And so they apply, they get it. And these poor veterans go to these clinicians who are civilians who are not trained in this area of PTSD, complex PTSD, mood disorders, and then they get almost fucked up. There's so much, oh my gosh, that seems so terrible. Like they don't feel normal within this therapeutic environment. They feel abnormal even further. I mean, I've had therapists tell one of my female clients, they asked her, would you want to go back to Afghanistan? She said, yeah, in a heartbeat. And I said, oh, you're suicidal, aren't you? And it's like,
What?
and this was a VA. This is a VA.
I get like I'm having a hard time getting my mind around that. Like, how do you make that? Because you don't have any experience with being in the military. That's how you make that leap.
But this was a VA group therapy session she was made to go to. And she said, I felt so crazy that I almost started acting more crazy because this is a bar they set for me. It's like, they put me in a room with a bunch of females who had mommy issues and who weren't veterans. And then they told me I was wrong and for how I was feeling. And all I wanted was to be with my tribe again. I wanted to feel normal again. And I felt normal in that environment. Oh, great. Because that was a self-defense mechanism that kept you alive when you were deployed. And then here you are in civilian sector and your defenses are going off. And they're like, well, this is how we feel normal. We got to find our tribe again. And for her, she made it to me. We got it settled out and she's good. She's happy. She's healthy. She's on her way.
But beautiful. I love a happy ending, girl. It gets me emotional. It gets me in my feelings thinking about a sister that's out there, because is what happens a lot of times is we leave the military and then we're sort of out there in the wind, right? We're going to talk about your transition out next. And we're out here in the wind, right? And sometimes maybe we didn't have the best experience in. So now we're like kind of turning our back on everything government or everything military, but we're out here swinging in the wind and we're still the odd man out. I like to say we're the unicorn, because if you find a female veteran out here, you better grab her up. Okay. Because she's a gift. All right. She is a gift for your life, your business, your life, your friendship, like whatever. You found a gift. All right. So anyway, we're out here on our own. What we need is that community, which is part of the reason I do this podcast, is to bring us together so that we're not out here alone. We have each other, and because once you start making those connections with other female veterans or finding a group of like Woven or the Barbara Giordano Foundation does it really amazingly. And there's so many groups that I meet up with, or I will go do a workshop at, or whatever, that are groups of female veterans, and we all come together and hang out for a night. And I never feel better. I am so excited whenever I get a chance to go hang out with a group of female veterans. I don't care when you served. I don't care what branch you served in. It's amazing. It's a good time. And we just talk stories, and we all leave there feeling replenished. And that's what I always say. Like, it's beautiful that that she found you, and that you were able to help her, because she could have been easily one of those women who took her life because she was feeling crazy because she was so misunderstood out here on her own.
And she was extremely suicidal and suicidal ideations. And I didn't fall in love with her. I was like, hey, in that instance, in that conversation with her, I reminded her of all the good things she had around her and told her, like, I'm not leaving her. I got you back. I'm not letting you go. So you stick with it. I'm going to stick with it with you. So I think that's oftentimes what my clients need to hear, is that I got your back. Like, we're doing this together. We're going to go through the fire together. And that's what we do. We go through the fire and we come out the other side, because that's the only way we complete this journey and bring it full circle.
That's beautiful. And so I know that you do a lot of work with therapy, but earlier we were talking about your transition out. And you said that it was really, really difficult, even though the skills that you learned helped you become really well-rounded. But you got out there in the civilian world, and what happened? What was that transition? What made it so difficult for you?
So for me, I said in the beginning, I found my community, my tribe, when first going into ROTC and to the Marine Corps. I felt normal. Like, I was that little girl who didn't want to wear dresses because I wanted to go play on the playground with the boys and like hang upside down and do the scary things and jump off the cliffs. Like, that was me. And so then being surrounded by a bunch of me's and being like, oh, we're all doing stupid, crazy stuff. And we get paid for this. Like I said, competitive shooter. I love shooting. My civilian counterparts can't relate to a lot of my interests or hobbies. So anyway, getting out, I had 2 months notification that, hey, this drawdown's happening. Thank you for serving. Have a great life. And for me, I was married to a service member who was selected and still in the military. I was injured. I was recovering from surgery. I could not have full range of my motion in my arm still because of I developed nerve damage pretty severely after surgery. So the physical therapist wasn't a great therapist. They didn't work with me very well. So here I am, pretty much crippled, in my opinion. My back, my spine hurt every single day of my life. I'm having joint pain all over my body, arthritis, carpal tunnel, knee pain, and the shoulder surgery that didn't go well. I can't even like button up a blouse because I don't have the range of motion to even button up a blouse or anything. And they were like, you're great. And I looked at this sacrifice I made. I looked at all the things I went through and not complaining and not drawing attention to my poor medical care or, being a secretarial billet for so many years, 2 years of my career. And it was like, for what? Here I am. I can't even have I'm still having fertility issues. So that's a whole nother thing. And even if I had a child, I couldn't pick them up because I'm so crippled in my mind from this power athlete that I started to be. So I went from this high of being able to charge that brick wall and run through it. Okay, don't go over it, just run through it. Got it. To now I'm having all these medical issues and then diagnoses and no one's helping me. And my husband at the time was gone, every month. We were never together. So it was just me in the house darning socks. Literally, that was my first day after I got out. I'm just reorganizing the sock drawer. And I was like, this is what my life has come to. Fuck my life. And my identity was lost. My community was lost. My peer group was lost. The structure that I missed and wanted so much as a child was gone. The community in itself, I didn't really speak to my friends because I didn't want to make them uncomfortable. So I separated myself from even my active duty friends. And now here I am, just a spouse. And nothing against spouses or military spouses. You guys have the hardest job in the world. But I didn't want to be just a spouse. I wanted to be a Marine. And I felt like that was taken from me. I joined the reserves right away. I started serving 3 days later, but it wasn't the same. It was kind of just a very loose description of what the Marine Corps is. Like, you go there 1 week in a month and it's disorganized and chaotic. And anyway, bless their hearts. We moved to Texas 6 months later. So I was like, I'm using my GI Bill and let's do this. I picked a school off a whim. I was like, I kind of wanted to be a therapist when I was a kid. Let's do therapy. And picked the school, got in, God opened these doors for me. And then I met my veteran friend. It was a veteran program at Texas A&M. It was a marriage and family therapy with a veteran emphasis on it. And so I met my best friends there. Michael was one of my best friends. He was a Marine. We did the butt sniff and we're like, we know each other. Who are you?
We're Marines.
He found out I was an officer and called me ma'am for 3 weeks. I just didn't correct him. So, yes, I over a lot of whiskey and a lot of American honey, we sat around a fireplace telling each other stories and bringing our friends into this fold. And we call ourselves First Civ Div.
That's cute.
It was hard. It was very hard. And there was a lot of emotional stuff I had to go through because that was my family. My family, for very intense reasons, that military was my family unit. And I couldn't really see what purpose I had anymore because I was doing so much work with the Marine Corps and that was my goal and that was all I wanted to be. Who was I now besides darning socks and drinking whiskey? But time heals all. And through the next 3 years of that master's program, learning, I went to therapy. I started going to therapy personally to find out, like, dealing with some childhood stuff that I had not dealt with, talking it over with my friends a lot, back and forth conversations about their deployments in my life, and um, healing from a lot of those open wounds of, like we were talking about, those gray areas. Was I good enough? Did I do enough? Why is this where I'm at in my life now? And they reminded me that, in the best way, I was kind of being selfish. And I loved it because they said I was such a blessing to their life. They had no one. They didn't have each other. They had no one. They had no veteran friends before we all got together. And I had a very unique gift for therapy and helping them heal from their traumas that they plagued for 15 plus years. And God had a bigger plan for my life besides doing what I did. And so I was very blessed to have that moment in my life to be in the Marines and to experience the things I did, because it's a part of me. It's a part of my identity. But in my world, God has such a bigger plan for all of us. And for me, it's definitely, I'm very blessed to be uniquely qualified to be a therapist and to identify with my veterans on a different level that others can't. So, yeah, my friend Michael, he said I saved his life, but I think in contrast, he saved mine. And it was.
Okay, girl. You're gonna make me cry in this episode. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. I love that. I mean, because we need to be out here saving each other's lives,
We
right?
do. I mean, because who's going to do it for us? There's no civilian organization that's put together on a mass level that's going to be perfect. And if we don't go out and reach out to our friends, if we don't reach out to our other counterparts, other veterans, be involved in some way, we lose the blessing of what they have for us and what we can do for them. Sometimes it's just a matter of, can you listen? Can you just listen long enough to hear their story? And I find that in therapy, I just listen and just give them that space to be, to exist again and to laugh about boot camp stories and to laugh about the good and the bad.
Yeah, for sure. I feel akin to that with this podcast. So we've been talking about your transition out, and it led you into therapy. And I know that you have an amazing business called Breakthrough Therapy. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Awesome. So Marine Corps, right? So I get my master's degree. I take the national exam. I'm licensed in Texas. Cool. Marine Corps is like, you're moving to California. It's the only state you cannot practice in out of the 50 states.
Wow, of course.
Great. I love it. So I spent like almost a year doing that job. I was telling you about the resource stuff on the space that I'm at. And I was like, God, like, you put me this way. You put me with this on my heart. And through a series of just events of me trying to apply to my doctorate program to fill the space until I could get licensed or fully licensed or practice in a state I could practice in. I went to this doctorate program. I got through all the stages of interviewing. And again, being the only veteran, they said, what is your mission? What do you want to accomplish with this doctorate program? And I said, I want to change the world for veterans.
That's a good answer.
It's a lofty goal. But I told him, I gave this little 10-minute speech about, like, within this 10 minutes about how veteran suicide is and how we're not able to meet the requirements as clinicians. And at the end of it, I said, hey, this speech was 10 minutes long. Just think, every 60 seconds, a veteran just took their life.
Mm.
So within this time, what am I not doing with my life until I get this certification, this doctorate behind me, so I can go off and have the credentials to be able to make a change on a grander scale? Surprisingly, like, I won the crowd, but I didn't get into the program. But man, I was on fire. I was like, I got to do something. So God bless it, COVID hit. And all the telehealth red tape went away. You can now do telehealth in the state that you're licensed in, what I'm doing now. But because of COVID, they eliminated any type of red tape that you would have to jump through to get to be a telehealth therapist. So, so things
Yay.
come good out of COVID, guys.
Mhm.
So yes,
Said everyone who works from home now.
yes. And telehealth is like who knew really what this was before COVID? Really. And then now you see every commercial with like Michael Phelps on there going, do this telehealth therapy with people. So
Right.
yeah, it opened it up. I'm certified in trauma. I deal with PTSD and complex trauma. It's my specialty out of Texas for veterans. I like veterans, but I work with civilians as well. It's breakthroughtherapytexas.com is the website. But no, I love what I do. But one day I want to get back to Texas. I want to get my doctorate. I want to teach doctoral students about veterans and trauma and complex trauma. It's a subpopulation that we don't learn much about unless you're a part of, but it's one of the subpopulations that is most likely to kill themselves. We learn about a lot of cultural, being aware of cultural differences, but veterans isn't one of them. And it's a shame because how we talk and our dark humor and how we interact with others and the complexity of the things we go through, even the modalities that you go to a therapist and they're like, I use solution focus, I use EMDR or CBT or DBT. Those are meant for one time trauma and they were created by civilians inside of a closed environment for civilians that have a car accident or a sexual assault. They are not meant for the rigorous constraints of the military and the training that's applied to that human being, where military sexual assault, well, you went through boot camp, you went through this high stressed environment, then this trauma happened to you, and then correspondingly, all these negative things probably came about from it. And then now you're a civilian and you're trying to explain to another civilian therapist why you didn't say anything right away or why the government had control of your life to the extent that it did. And you educate that therapist more than they actually end up helping you.
Yes. And in fact, I have had that experience. And I bet everyone listening, or 9 out of 10, is like raising their hand. Like, me too. Whether it's your regular doctor or your therapist or someone in between there. Okay. You're educating them if they have not served. And it's sad. And it's not something that we should have to go through.
And that's one of my platforms I advocate for is like find your tribe, A, but B, find someone that is specialized in trauma or complex PTSD and or it helps if they are a veteran or work with veterans because they're going to understand your isms for the most part. And if not, it's going to be very limited education that you have to give them because they've already heard a lot of it. So the shock factor's worn off. And that's the thing. Like veterans are normal because obviously everything that you've been conditioned to do is a learned response or a self-defense mechanism that kept you alive in a bad situation. That type of cultural difference, I would equate it to anything. If you have a third world country citizen come to the United States and tries to talk to a American therapist, it would be the same cultural barriers there about like what life is like when you have to survive or when you just have to get it done, right? And so
Yeah, that's a great point. I'd like to say something similar too about leaving the military, transitioning out is like when you emigrate to the United States and you need to assimilate the culture and you sort of begin to lose your identity a little bit from where you came from because you're trying to, but you always feel sort of like the odd man out. And I have so many friends that have emigrated from all over the world that I really understand where they're coming from when they're trying to explain it to me. Cause I'm like, yeah, that's how it felt when I left the military. I totally get where you're coming from. So I love that you said that. I want to talk about your shooting team
yeah,
actually a little bit before we wrap.
I love shooting. As they say that in California. No, I,
Sorry.
I got to give it props. California does some of the best competitive shooters come out of California. I don't know how
Yeah.
this happens since their rifles are completely illegal by the state standards.
Interesting.
But they do. They have some amazing, amazing shooters here in California. So my father, like I said, was a Marine and he was a police officer after that. And I grew up in a very tomboy type environment that fit me very well. So I shot his guns intermittently throughout my childhood. I was never afraid of them. Joined the Marine Corps, did the first rifle range. I was like, this is so much fun, guys. Like, I did extremely well in the Marine Corps rifle ranges and extremely well compared to my peers. And it was just a natural proclivity to hitting the black. And it was such a Zen state. Like, you get behind the rifle, and you're just like, it's like your yoga. And you're just like,
Interesting.
I love it. I absolutely love it. They actually find, I don't know the reason, I had to do some more research, but women shoot better than men statistically. And it could be because expectation management or muscular structure, or even the way that, we hold the rifle similarly to how you hold a baby on the hip, like the way you cock your hip out and the way your weight's distributed. So women just naturally fall into being better shooters upon first approach than men for some reason. But yeah, so like I said, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I stumbled across the shooting team while I was here in California about 2 years ago. And they invited me out to come see what they did. And I was like, okay, this is a whole new world. It's like trying to teach you how to play lacrosse if you never played it. Like, I had no idea what the rules were, what the gear was. It was nothing like the Marine Corps range, but similar, if that makes sense. Like, it's a very civilized sport in the way that you wear this heavy shooting jacket, you have this glove, you have this leather sling. There's certain positions you do. I like the Marine Corps where it's like more combat oriented and the rifles are way lighter. Um, but yes, and so I have been learning a lot from them. I'm actually going to nationals at the end of this month to shoot in Ohio. So
Ah, congratulations.
yeah, it's gonna be fun. Like, I don't have any expectation. I just, the Marine cockiness in me. I'm like, I'm gonna destroy them all. But in reality, there's some amazing shooters. So to put it in perspective, the targets are at 200, 300, and 600 yards, and
Wow.
the X is 3 inches, about the size of a softball. The 10 ring is 2 more inches outside of that, so the 6 inches, and then the 9 ring is 12 inches. At 200 yards standing, the target looks the size of a nickel. The black is the X10
Wow.
size of a nickel visually at 200 yards standing. And you could hit the black all day and miss a 10 ring and only hit the 9 and lose the match because that's not a good enough score. So yeah, it's great because that rings don't change as you get further back. Just the black expands, but the sizes of the X, 10, and 9 don't change. It just visually looks different. So you're at the 600-yard line trying to hit a 3 inch target in the wind.
Goodness, I can't even imagine. I will never hit it. I'm already blind. So, but I do like to shoot. I don't own any guns, though I would. I definitely have my opinions about gun laws and all of that, but I mean, I'm military. I like my guns. But
You're like prepping yourself like,
yeah, I like my guns. What do you want me to say? But I did do gun quals in the Navy, and it was all very. This is like my funny story. It was all very sexist. It was such a sexist experience for me because I was really excited to learn this, and they were like, "Here's your gun, and set it up this way, and let me load it for you." And like, so it wasn't really like a qualification, and here's how you aim. Oh, you did it. Here you go. You passed. So that was kind of my experience. And I was actually really insulted after it. But again, didn't want to make waves, right? Went into that gray area of should I complain about this? Because I didn't learn anything and I don't feel like, you know what I mean? I didn't get to connect with this.
yeah.
And then I was like, well, At least I passed. You know what I mean? Like, so I sort of just left it. But I did shoot. I went shooting a couple of years ago, and it was really fun. And I have a girlfriend who shoots, and she keeps inviting me, and I'm always too busy. But I need to make time for it because it's actually really fun,
It
you know?
is.
So yeah, I feel that. I'm happy for that
And
for
you're
you.
naturally better at it than your male counterparts. So
Well, now that I know that, I'm going in with a whole new attitude. You know what? It's funny that we were talking about this before the show. We were talking about an article you read about a female, and we were talking about a male and female and getting the job that's right for your body. And
yes.
I was loving what you were saying about that.
So the article you referred to, just kind of recap, was it's all over Facebook. It implies that a female just passed the Navy SEAL training, but that's not what that's not what's actually in the article. A female passed the boat crew training of the Navy SEALs, and I'm going to be ignorant because I don't know anything past that statement. But apparently, it's not Navy SEALs.
We'll Google it.
The boat crew version, which seems pretty hard. You know,
it's still hard.
Yeah, cool. But in all the comment sections, it was like girl power and we're running the world and blah blah blah. I know I have the very unpopular opinion that, in my opinion, going through the history and everything you all have heard now, is that I went through 6 months of infantry type training in the Marine Corps. And out of the 20 some females, 300 males, 20 some females, we all walked away with injuries, nerve damage, fractures, breaks, hip fractures, spinal damage. But some of these smaller Marines, also male Marines, walked away with similar damages. So let's not just make a gender.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always been my strong opinion that if a Marine construct, if a small male Marine can meet the standards of, say, infantry, then they should be allowed to meet and maintain those standards. Any Marine, not just have to be of stature, but any Marine should be able to maintain those standards and be able to join the infantry. And vice versa. If you have a really tall Marine, you're not going to be a Cobra pilot. You're not going to put them in a tank or an AAV because they're just not going to meet the physical requirements needed to be in those platforms. And so, too often, the Marine Corps has not done the best job at allocating jobs to the strengths of the recruits and the Marines that join the Marine Corps. It's kind of been like, hey, we need to fill these spots, let's fill them, to the detriment sometimes of people's inability to meet those requirements, male or females. And so when we start talking about female MOSs and male MOSs, and are we opening everything up, I don't think it's a great idea. I think if you open up the standard that any job is available to females or males, then a bar should be set for the physical requirements needed to maintain the standards of that position, and it should add to the mission capability of that service. And so it has nothing to do with equality. It has to do with common sense. It doesn't make sense to put a tiny Marine, male or female, in the infantry. Well, if they can meet the standards, then maybe. But if not, then why are we putting them in a position to fail? Or putting a very tall 6'4" Marine in a Cobra, which they can't meet the requirements to be in that type of platform anyway. And so it just comes down to the logic for me. I don't feel equal or less equal than my male counterparts because I didn't become an infantry officer. I didn't want to. I knew my body's limits couldn't withstand the rigors of that training, in addition to what I've already went through. And so I was good being in the air wing or good being in the ground side. Like, I'm okay with those. So it's just a fine balance when we take the emotions out of it. I don't think it has anything to do with equality. I think it has to do with meeting the mission's capabilities. And those equalities come when there's a standardized test, not just the PFT or CFT, but a standardized fitness performance that you have to meet in order to be in that job. So if I can't do 24 pull-ups, but I need to pull myself up over a wall with 100 some pounds on my back, then it's going to be a problem. So it's just meeting the standards across the board. And I think that we can, as females, can meet standards with certain training and preparation, but how much of that will take away from doing the job itself? Like, what is our recovery time? How much training and muscle mass do we need to meet the average male standards? And also, how much time does that require for us to take to meet those standards? And so I don't think I'm any less capable than my male counterparts just because I can't carry 200 pounds for 20 miles. Like, I'll drive a truck. Like, we're
Right.
good.
I agree with it. Like, I actually really feel what you're talking about. I think it's a leadership issue. It's a question of logic. And I think the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because sometimes people listen to this show that are contemplating going into the military, right? And I definitely told my own niece, check out the episodes of my show so that you know what you can expect, good or bad. And you go into the military, into the Air Force with your eyes open and your head on a swivel. Right. So, but that's good, right? That's good information though, because when you're going in, think about the long term effects of that position of what you're going to have to do on your body, right? And go for those jobs that you're going to have longevity in and know what the requirements are physically for you, and what is the best job going to be for you physically and intellectually as well. So I think that's a really important conversation to have and to something to think about for people who are going into the military or deciding which next job that they want to go into in order to advance.
It's like take your pride aside, and that's for males and females. And it's like,
Mhm.
what is your strengths? Mine's logistics, and I'm able to be very strategic and I'm very logistically mindset. I'm also great at shooting and team management and working with leadership and stuff. So I put myself in positions where my strengths are. Not that I'm not working on my weaknesses, but I know where I'm most happiest. And so I've seen females go and apply for these in the case of this story and for an infantry type position. I may be misquoting, but there's 32 female officers that applied for the infantry officers, and only one got through. I don't know. There might have been a second one up to this point over the course of what, 9 years. Only one got through, and she had to get out after 4 years for injuries. To my
Mhm.
understanding of how the story went, but cool, she got through, neat. But what is the damage that we did to her body? Like the toll I still have on my body, and
Mhm.
I would absolutely do the Marine Corps again, absolutely 100%. Like knowing everything I know now, absolutely. But I was a team player. I was part of the team
Mhm.
and I carried my weight and my capabilities added to the team. I don't need to pretend to be something I'm not. And I'm not a tall Marine. So I'm not going to pretend to be a 6'4" tall Marine. But yeah, I can be a badass in my own sphere of influence. And so that's what I did.
It's amazing. And it sounds like amazing advice, which also leads me to my next question for you. And that is, what advice do you have for your female veterans coming behind you?
So I think especially for my Marine veterans, but female veterans, if I can speak in general. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a normalcy at the end of the tunnel. I love how you were talking earlier. Just to recap, you said that when you got out, it was where do you fit in this world again? We're such a minority in the military that we have to be one of the dudes or be part of the team and act like one of the dudes. And then we get into the civilian world and we don't relate to females and we don't relate to the male population anymore. We're kind of like this weird hybrid, this unicorn. I embrace my differences. If that means I have to work for myself, then good. I'm really good at being a boss. I'm in charge.
I feel that.
you um, Finding that tribe, I can't emphasize it enough. There's support groups, Facebook groups, there's organizations, wounded warriors. You don't have one, make one. Like there's someone out there looking to join your tribe and be a part of your team. So I say that we need to do from the grassroots movement, taking care of each other from the bottom up and not feeling sorry for ourselves. These are our scars that we went through. It shows us where we went and where not where we're going. These scars show us our history, but not any defining feature of what we are or who we are. And so I embrace the good, the bad, and the ugly about my time in the service. And I choose to remember it in a positive light because it really did define a large part of who I am. And I love that part. So it's kind of perception's reality. We change our perception, our reality changes. And so we can choose to feel sorry for ourselves, or we can choose to do something like yourself and to be like, I'm going to change the world in my own sphere of influence and I'm going to do it this way. And maybe, like you said earlier, maybe going and volunteering at those shelters or working with those veterans on a different level is enough, or just making a phone call and just listening to how someone's day is going and letting them be real with how their day is. So, yeah, grassroots.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Grassroots. That's right. I mean, it's funny that you said that word specifically because it's what I usually tell people. So, in between the time, because I served in the mid 90s and probably during the last peacetime, we may ever say, who knows? But when I served in the between that time and the time I created this podcast, that's what I was doing. I didn't have the foresight to join a group, but I kept, I guess, on God, the universe, whatever you want to believe in, kept putting vets in my path that
Yeah.
needed support and needed help. And that's what I'm good at. I'm good at showing love. I'm good at supporting. I'm good at nurturing. I'm good at checking on you to see how you're doing, asking you if you took your meds today, that kind of thing. And I'd come across a vet that was contemplating suicide and just step up my game for them and be there for them. And one of the things that I would always suggest to them would be to go and help another veteran,
Mhm.
you know, go find a way to support the veteran community. And that what I mean, I am blessed to say that none of the veterans that I ever talked to, dealt with, tried to support, ever took their lives. So I'm blessed to say that. But I think it had to do with that advice. Like when
Yeah.
they go out and like get involved with other groups of veterans, even if you completely hated your military experience, even if you think the military is the worst thing that ever happened to you in your life, when you go connect with that other, there's something, they're just, even me, like I thought, oh, like you said, I drank the Kool-Aid. I thought I tasted the Kool-Aid and I was like, I'm not sure. So if you know me, like my episode with my friend Jana or anyone that served with me and they come on the Female Veterans podcast, they will tell you that I was a free spirit even while serving. And perhaps it's because it was peacetime, but who knows, right? I was such a on my own level. And sometimes it got me into trouble. But usually I was actually very lucky and had a very blessed experience, right? In the grand scheme of things. But even if you didn't have that experience, and even if you walked away feeling like, I hate the military, I hate everything it stands for, I hate the US government, I hate all of that, even if you feel like that, there's still something that got in, even for me. And so connecting with other veterans, male or female now, because I belong to the American Legion and I would go hang out at the bar with those old vets for
Right?
okay,
And
for
the best
years.
stories, do
Right,
you?
they do.
Oh my
And
god.
they were always really sweet to me. Most of them were very much gentlemen. And my ex-husband used to come with me too, and he was like a fan favorite. I actually had to cut him off from the Legion because he was spending too much time there as my guest when I wasn't there because they liked him so
Yeah.
much. So, but it was great. But that's another place where there's not a lot of women, so you kind of have to kick down some doors. But if you get in there, or if we went and joined the Legion and more groups of women, it's such a great experience and a great place to connect with veterans. And there's so many organizations now that it didn't feel like it when I first came out, but it feels like there's so many organizations now that you can go be a part of and support each other. And you get so much out of that. Like it is life changing and it can be life saving
And
also.
the last thing is like, I always tell there's 4 things that we kind of talk about with PTSD and trauma, and one of those 4 is empowerment. You have to empower yourself, feel empowered, and that may be changing your mindset because the world's still going to turn the way it is, and so it depends on how you perceive the world and how you think is depending on what your outlook is going to be. And so I know David Goggins, one of the ones that I really loved his book, and he's like, go do hard things. Dan Crenshaw is another one, Fortitude. And again, go do hard things. Challenge yourself to be like, I'm going to run that 5K. I'm going to run that. I have that same female veteran that I spoke of. I challenged her to do hard things in order to build her resiliency, and she signed up for a partial triathlon. I didn't know they had partials, but she's going to go do a partial triathlon after not being physically active for years. But that's
Wow.
the hard thing, right? And so you find strength and meeting goals and overcoming goals and challenges and other hard things. And so I'm all about physical activities in some capacity. You can't run, go for a swim. Go do hard things in order to build your resiliency up again, because that's how the military started our foundation, right? We did hard things and we became resilient. We got to find that resiliency within ourselves and then spread that wealth amongst each other.
Wow, absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for such amazing words of wisdom and love for our veteran sisters. I appreciate you so much. And so I know you mentioned your website earlier, but will you please repeat it for us and for anywhere we can find you to follow along your journey?
Absolutely. It's www.breakthroughtherapytexas, spell out Texas.com. And then you can also find me on Facebook, Breakthrough Therapy. I'm not gonna lie, I got an Instagram something or other, a Twitter something or other. And I don't know how it works, but I'm active on Facebook, Breakthrough Therapy, and I'm always can be contacted through my website, breakthroughtherapytexas.com. No, it's a and even on my business card has a little EGA on it. I'm just camo, but yes, no, I love what I do. So if you have questions, let me know. And I do a lot of psychoeducation, things like this, because I think what you're doing is extremely important and just normalizing our community and making it not a stigma anymore. They're not alone. We're not alone. Jesus, like there's too many of us. We just have to find each other.
Absolutely. And we're going to find each other and we're going to kick down doors. That's what we're doing to let people know that we are here and we matter and we're doing amazing things for ourselves and for each other. So, thank you so much for being here. I will put all your links in the description of this episode, also known as the show notes. And that way people can find your links easier and connect with you. And I just want to thank you so much for being a guest. It has been such a real pleasure to connect with you and hang out with you. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up. I just want to say once again, thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. I mean, 7 seasons in, who would have ever thought? And you're still listening and you're still supporting. Thank you for all your donations. If you want to donate, it's in the description box. If you want to connect with me and email me, the info is in the description box of this episode. Also, you can follow me on Instagram at the Female Veterans Podcast or my personal one at Creativity. And I'm on Twitter too at FemVet Podcast. And there is a little community building on Facebook. I need to put some more work into it, so bear with me. I am a one-woman show, so there's a lot going on at all times. But again, thank you for listening and supporting this podcast and all of the women who are the amazing guests that really make the show what it is. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you next time.